That's what makes the difference in getting the kids and helping improve their lives so that they're healthy, they're happy, and that they are living the life that they were meant to be living, right? So that's why Dr. Angela and I are here. That's why we're live tonight, is to do just this, but we do this for you, and we do this for your child and for your family so that we can create a happier life. So, what is sensory processing disorder? Technically, it is defined as it's a neurophysiologic condition in which sensory input, either from the environment or from one's body, is poorly detected, poorly modulated, or poorly interpreted, and to which atypical responses are observed. So there's a lot in that definition, and it's very technical and very specific. But in other words, I'm going to break it down so that it makes sense for you, because that's how I have to do it to make sense in my brain. But in other words, it is a condition that the brain has trouble receiving and responding to information that is coming through their senses, right? So eyes, ears, nose, mouth, touch, balance, equilibrium, coordination, proprioception. So here are the facts with SPD. New research shows that SPD sensory processing affects at least 1 in 20 children. So the prevalence of SPD it's actually much higher in those that are associated with ADHD and autism, but yet there's no cause of it, right? There's no reason for it. So some medical doctors and some psychologists have come together and they have concluded that in these kids, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems are not functioning typically, which absolutely makes sense from a chiropractor standpoint, because that's what we work on. That's what we are constantly testing and then improving on is the nervous system, is the balance between their sympathetic and their parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is the survival stress mode. Parasympathetic is the healing, adaptability, efficiency side of that. And these medical doctors and these psychologists, they've gone even further with the label of sensory processing disorder with another aspect of it, which is sensory over responsivity, so SOR. So if one has SPD or they are suspected to have it, they're showing some signs of it, it's because your child is oversensitive to things in their environment. Your child is still able to detect sensory inputs. So they're still able to have that receiving end of that. But the information that comes in, it becomes mixed up because of a neurological traffic jam, meaning that certain parts of the brain are receiving information that doesn't make sense, and it's trying to coordinate a response to that. So then the outward expression doesn't really make sense, if that makes sense to you guys. So things like sounds and touch, they're the most common ones. And that's the most common ones that we typically see. Others to think about are things like poor coordination and balance, vision, taste and smell, gut function, inappropriately understanding where you are in space, which is our proprioception. That's that term for that. And so this can cause you to be clumsy and bump into things. So this becomes even more important because as your child gets older and they engage in things like play and sports and learning skills, it can be even more difficult for them to learn and grow if they already have all of these challenges. So when you see a medical provider, their goal is to determine how much are these struggles that your child is dealing with, how does it affect their day-to-day life, right? So to the point to where they're putting them on a spectrum of severity. So little things with like taste and touch, with certain texture foods are one thing. Loud sounds like a leaf blower outside of their window becomes a little bit more evident. And then you have those that are even further to the point of being unresponsive to their environment, like extreme heat, extreme cold, even pain. It doesn't affect your child like you would think it would. And so from our professional experience, it's never just one thing for these kids. It's never just a little sensitivity here or there, a little emotional dysregulation, maybe some attention and focus problems. Sometimes it's really actually a combination of all of these things that makes the big impact for your child's future. The reason being is because there is a lot of overlap in these symptoms and issues because their nervous system is taking on that job of trying to deal and cope with that stress to the point when it becomes exhausted, tired, run down. That's when these symptoms continue to develop in and of themselves and continue to, you see the severity kind of over time get worse. So just to give you an example, I met a lot of people this weekend at the Greek Festival. Awesome event, 3-day event. We love it. And for adults, it's so exciting, right? You get to go, you have lots of people, lots of lights, lots of food. And so it's a lot of fun. And so for a kid who's going through sensory issues, that's a lot of stimulation, right? So parents came up to us at our booth because we had our baby comfort station, a safe place for parents to nurse and change a child's diaper, right? It was awesome. But we also had a little sign that said sensory processing for this webinar. And a lot of parents, they've heard of sensory processing. Some of them had no idea what it was, so they had some questions. And then some parents who never even came to us, they had no idea or no clue that their child was actually expressing some of these symptoms. So a lot of kids I saw, kids have to go to the bathroom, and we were right next to the bathroom. Also, on the other side, there's the stage, right? The stage with the loud music and sounds and lots of people and dancing. So if your child is struggling with sensory issues and they go to the bathroom because you have to take them to the bathroom, that's a lot of stimulation in their brain. That gets them overwhelmed. And I saw a lot of kids with their hands over their ears, covering their ears because it was too loud, or covering their eyes and looking down because it was just too much stress in their body to actually handle and deal with. So that's part of that. That's just to give you an example of what it looks like on the outside to them. Some common approaches to helping these kids are things like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, psychological therapy. So these therapies are absolutely great. And they really do help to reintegrate the basics of developing coordination, thinking, and communicating skills, right? But the only thing that really holds these therapies back is the information receiving end of that. So remember, receiving and then responses, that's the problem with sensory processing. And so if your child's brain is overwhelmed by stress already, and then you introduce all of the stimulation like we had at the Greek Festival, but yet you're using therapies to try and help them to improve their control and coordination, that one side of it, you will get some improvement. You will get some improvement on that, but it will be difficult to get them back to full healthy function because the brain is unable to appropriately understand the information coming in. That's the receiving part of that 100%. So hopefully, that makes sense to you guys. Sensory processing disorder, it's about the receiving and then the coordination functions of the brain and the nervous system. So the true key with helping these kiddos is affecting both ends of that, the receiving and the coordination. So how do we test your child's dysfunction, right? So, and then what is it that we do that actually helps these kiddos to improve their lives? We use neurological scans that actually test a child's nervous system function. I'm going to click the next button here to take you to the next slide. If it works for me. There we go. So you can see there on the right, cycle of stress, how it can overwhelm a child. This is the outward, this is what they're showing. So this is what we focus on as a chiropractor. We're looking at all the stimulations going into their body. And this is what we're looking at because this is how we're testing that. So when we use the neurological scans, we are able to find neurological tension, which is stress, right? So that's that chemical stress up there on the top left. We also test neurological adaptability and efficiency. So that's that function of this whole process. And the neurological balance, the coordination and the control. So that's the emotion and that's the physical part of that. So can you see exactly what we're able to test when we run these scans on your child? We're testing the stress, we test the function, and then we are determining the imbalances of the receiving and the coordinating responses of your child's body. So it's pretty advanced and it's pretty complicated, but the understanding of them is pretty simple, actually. And so that's how we're able to figure out exactly how to help these kiddos by testing all three aspects of these interferences and irritations into the body and what they're creating in your child's body to have these responses. So these three different scans with our technology helps us understand what is going on in your child's body. Our first one is the rolling thermal scan. So we're using infrared technology to actually measure temperature And temperature is a clear and accurate indicator of neurological stress and neurological tension. And it's telling us where exactly it is that's building up on your child's body. I'm going to give some examples of these as well, and they're coming up. I just want to explain them for you of what they look like. The next one is our surface EMG, and this scan helps to measure the electrical impulses in your child's muscles along their spine. So remember that proprioception aspect that we talked about? That's exactly what we're looking at here. So understanding the results of this scan, it can tell us if your child is suffering with SPD or something else on the list on the right there, how much energy coordination is being used in those muscles that's being sent out from their brain. So if their brain is receiving too much or too little energy or information and it doesn't make sense, it will send out that same response, which is jumbled information, mixed up information, sometimes wrong information, and that is why their system is stressed and their responses are that of overly sensitive responses. So because their brain cannot make sense of it. So in other words, low coordination, low control of this energy means too much stress is creating a dysfunction in the system. And the stresses, that's what this cycle of stress is showing, all three aspects of how it creates that vicious cycle of stress. So it helps us to understand that. So it also tells us the quality of that information that's being sent out. Is it coordinated? Is it controlled? Is it symmetrical? And is it balanced? So if it is not, where is that imbalance that is causing that dysfunction? So one example I like to give is things like socks or clothes and tags on these clothes. Your body is supposed to recognize that there's something there, right? There's something that's scratching me. Maybe it's a tag. And okay, we put it on, a couple minutes, we recognize it and we forget about it. The brain understands that it's not a threat and it's just there, and then we forget about it. For some kids, things like socks, that's not a threat. Threats are what stimulate that sympathetic side to create a response that we go into survival mode. If it's not okay, we take it off or we get rid of it. We get away from that stress. Things like socks shouldn't do that. And socks can overwhelm our system. If we have a huge system of stress here, socks can be just one simple thing that activates that system. And then we've had kids who couldn't wear socks because it would overstimulate them. They would melt down, pitch tantrums, and get their socks off. So I just want to give you an example of that. The next part of our scans is our heart rate variability. This is a very important part of the scan because it actually helps us understand how deep-rooted is your child's nervous system on that sympathetic, that stress side, or the parasympathetic side. So if they're trying to activate good, healthy healing and growth, but they just can't do it. So just like those doctors concluded in those kids with SPD, that there's an improper balance in the functioning of the autonomic nervous system, which is made up of that sympathetic and parasympathetic side. If you're activating the sympathetic side, you're functioning on what we call high stress. If you're activating the parasympathetic side and it's low in its adaptability and its efficiency, your body is overworking, becoming exhausted, and it just can't keep up. So if your child is stuck on one of these sides and scoring very low, how is it affecting their overall health when it comes to adaptability and efficiency when they need to be activating that healing, growing, learning, and developing parts of that system? So they need to be activating that as often, as frequently as possible because they're growing tremendously early on because that's what sets up the rest of their life. So let's jump into some of these stories. Let's see there we go. Perfect. All right. So the first story I want to share with you is this is the scans of a 9-year-old little girl. The ones on your left here, that was her first scan in our office, and the ones on the right, that was through a period of time with care. So this 9-year-old, she had trouble with sensory processing disorder. That's why their parents brought her in, because she was dealing with that. She had difficulty with certain textured foods, difficulty with clothes. I remember her complaining about our gowns. Our gowns are, they're cotton gowns, but they have these strings in the back where you tie them off. And she was complaining about the strings that were touching her. So that was a huge problem during our scan. She was having a hard time just in general with friends because she felt embarrassed and wanted to spend more time with her parents at home because of her sensitivities and her difficulties. So that was her on the left side. So lower left in that red, that white box that you see on that top skin on the left, That's where she was. She was on that sympathetic dominant side, high stress. And if your nervous system is functioning well and is functioning efficiently, you're supposed to be in the green box. And for kids, you're supposed to be closer to that 100 level in the green box center. She was really, really low. Her body was overwhelmed, overstressed, to where she needed more stimulation in her body because she was so understimulated. And so that was part of that sensory processing, to where whether she needed more stimulation or less stimulation, either way, it was so jumbled and mixed up that everything outward didn't make sense. But currently, so going from that left to the right, we got her to better balance. We got her almost in the green box, which was awesome. She was less overwhelmed, not as much texture sensitivities and food problems. She was wearing clothes, which was not a big deal. So no more meltdowns about wearing her school outfit to school anymore. And the parents were reporting that they were happier. The parents were actually thrilled to see their child have the ability, and this is in their words, feel better, act better, and emotionally react to her environment better. That was their words. That's awesome results just in a short amount of time. So a huge change in this kiddo's life for sure. And we actually continue to see that progress every week. But I wanted to show you one more part of her scan, which was the bottom part on the left. Can you see that it's not symmetrical, it's not balanced, and it's not even? So that was the amount of energy that her brain was receiving. Her brain was having an issue with the receiving and the coordination part of that. The receiving was too much energy, but the coordination of that made no sense in her body whatsoever. The next scan was her nervous system was functioning better. Her body was coordinating those responses. So the information coming into the brain and out from the brain was making sense, and that showed on that lower right scan there. So awesome results there for this kiddo. Huge change in her system. The next one I want to point out to you, see if we can get the next slide. There we go. Perfect. Starting to figure this thing out. The next one, we have a rolling thermal, which is that's testing the temperature. That's the thermal scan. The temperature imbalances, which is a clear indicator for neurological stress on their body, right? So this was a 3-year-old boy. He was having sensitivities from touch from his parents. Lots of meltdowns every single day. Couldn't handle wet clothes, certain texture vegetables and fruits. So the parents actually had to hide fruits and veggies in his meals, and he could actually pick them up even when they were chopped up really thin. Very hard time sitting still. So a little bit of that ADHD, ADD kind of playing a part into that. Again, overlapping of symptoms, right? Lots of toe walking. Toe walking is a clear indicator of stress on the bottom part of their spinal cord. And as you can see on the bottom part of that top scan on the top left, lots of red. He was standing up on his tippy toes to take the stress off of the spinal cord. So a clear indicator there of neurological stress. And behavior was pretty much different every single day. So emotion dysregulation, part of that. So you can see just in general, if you see the white on the scan, white means normal range. Huge difference in his scans later on, to where lots of neurological stress and tension off his body. We still had a little bit of work to do, so we weren't done, but we went from all of that stuff to he was having better emotions with less meltdowns and tantrums. He was eating foods just like the rest of the siblings. Behavior was a lot better. No more toe walking. Started playing outside more, getting dirty and not worrying about getting stuff on his hands and wet clothes. Huge change, right? That's where we should be. That's where kids should be. So a very big shift from what we were seeing and what parents were seeing in just a short amount of time. Again, going back to the lower part of our PowerPoint here, that's that receiving in and coordination part of that. That's where this is the bulk of where we see a lot of sensory issues in kids with our scans. You can see total energy at the bottom, 419. 419 means that there was 320% more information going to the brain. And the pattern, which was under 50%, meaning the coordination of that made no sense in the brain. So the outward expression of his information was jumbled. It was mixed up. There was a traffic jam in the nervous system function, which is the basis of sensory processing issues. To the next scan, which is matching with the rolling thermal, which we brought that total energy down to 177. So more than half below where he was before. We still had some work to do, like I said before, but the pattern went from 48 to 80%. Coordination and understanding of what was coming into his body was making the difference in getting him past what he was dealing with to living life like he was meant to as a 3-year-old. He ended up being a 4-year-old when we took these next scans. So if you're wondering how your child's nervous system is working, just by looking at these scans and looking at his stories and all the stuff that we talked about, if you've been thinking about your child's diagnosis of SPD or suspect that there's an underlying reason for your child's symptoms that may resemble this or may resemble something like ADHD, ADD, autism, ODD, attention, or behavior issues, please give our team a call. Contact New Hope Chiropractic because we can help. We've seen the difference that we make in a child's life to take them from that stressed out, poor coordination, and poor controlled system that is stuck on, whether at home, in the classroom, that's not allowing your child to grow and to develop their brain and their nervous system normally, to less overwhelm, better function, better reports from school, better growth and better development. That includes information, improving their senses to where the information coming in and out of the brain is so much easier, so that if a balanced system is working efficiently, your responses, their responses to stress and to a challenged environment, it's not, instead of creating problems, it's actually helping in their growing and their learning phases. So it all lies within locating that cause of all that interference and all that stress that we talked about, reducing that cause and allowing their body to heal properly, to work appropriately, and then to function efficiently. So we would love to absolutely help your family, help your child, so that you guys can have a better life. And with all of that said, we are offering parents an opportunity for the next week only, an opportunity to have your child's nervous system checked for these disturbances in their receiving and their coordination ends of their body. This opportunity will help you guys with understanding what your child is going through, how to help them through that, and then give your child the best chance at life. Let me hit the stop share so I can pull up the chat box. There we go. All right, so we've got some questions in there. Our offer for you guys is our VIP discount for your first visit with us, which we will go through your consultation of your child. We'll go through our examination with our scanning technology to figure out what stress is on their body, and we will give you our official report of findings based on our professional recommendations on what we've seen with kids who've gone through this. And this could be the absolute difference in your child struggling for another year, struggling with school, with friends, with sports, with growing, developing, maybe learning to read and write. If you are tired of the struggle and you want answers to begin this process of helping your child, this is your chance. This is what we do every single day, is helping kids who are just like your kids feel better, be better, and function better.